So, welcome everybody to today's live session where, as well as human error, we will be focusing at new approaches to human risk management, leadership and resilience in building a secure future and what this means for recruiting the right talent in cybersecurity. We will be discussing this with Nick Wilding, who is known for his ideas in people-centric security. Nick's work emphasizes how our culture and leadership serve as our cyber front line. This conversation could reshape your whole perspective. So stay tuned for a riveting conversation that puts the spotlight on human facets of cybersecurity and the changes we need to adopt for a more secure digital future. Nick, would you like to just introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, James. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you today. I've worked in security for over 20 years. I worked for a company called Detica, which is now BAE Systems Digital Intelligence, for 11 years. Then moved on to a firm called Axelos Global Best Practice, where I led the design and launch and management of a new cyber resilience best practice called Resilia, which we sold on to another firm called the Access Group. I then moved on to become the Chief Innovation Officer for Cyber Risk Aware, one of the leading players in the new world of security awareness and culture change, which in itself was bought by another Irish company called Titan HQ 2 years ago. And I'm now an independent consultant in this space. And I'm working with some of the leading players as we speak around human risk management, which you'll hear a little bit more about shortly. Thanks, James.
So thanks, Nick. So let's get into the questions then. So can you explain human element in more detail and why it plays such a significant role in the success of cyber attacks? That's human error, sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm sure everybody's heard this expression, human error. Put simply, human error relates to the actions that any one of us, whether we're working on the front line or sitting in the boardroom or working in the office, working at home or on the move, any actions that could enable a cyber attack to succeed. Examples could include weak passwords, clicking on malicious links, sharing information with the wrong person, using insecure Wi-Fi, using an infected USB, etc., etc. There are many other cases of insecure or unsafe behaviours that, as I say, any one of us, important to note that any one of us could do. Last year's Verizon's data breach report that many of you may be aware of once again highlighted that 82% of all data breaches involve human error. It's clear that, to me, that people represent the critical cyber vulnerability for any organization. It's always really been the case since I've worked in security. Yet many organizations still believe that this is an issue, the human challenge, that can be solved with technology, and why we seem to be continue to sort of invest disproportionately in technology. It's not working to mitigate our human cyber risks. And it's a problem that's clearly going to grow. It's not going to go away, and it is going to grow as it becomes easier and more industrialized with the help of things like AI. It's the bad side of AI, for example. The harsh reality is that there's no silver bullet to solve the challenge. We're trying to get to a point where our employees instinctively work securely during their busy working and home lives. And we really do need new approaches to tackling what can often be seen as an intractable problem. Yeah.
Okay. So have you seen a fundamental change in the way organizations tackle human risk management in the last 10 years or so?
That's a good question. Fundamental change in the ways that organizations tackle the issue? No, not really. It's still, and I've worked with and advised hundreds of organizations around the world in this space around security awareness training, people-centered security, human risk management, whatever we want to call it. But it is evolving. It is still typically seen as a small backroom role played by someone within the security team, and often as part of a bigger role that person might have. So that person responsible for security awareness training might be wearing multiple hats as well. And typically, these people will send out some combination of security awareness training and phishing tests within their organization. Sometimes it's once a year, sometimes quarterly, sometimes more regularly. But it's true to say that it's not really evolved at the same pace as cyber criminals and the techniques that they're using. And it's worth also saying that Gartner recently highlighted that only about 20% of cyber incidents actually relate back to people clicking on a link, a phishing attack. So it's I need to emphasize the fact that there are so many other behaviors, actions that we can do that will actually endanger the companies that we're working for in terms of cyber attack. For me, we're not exploiting, leveraging new advances in technology, having greater access to different data sets and new tools like AI and machine learning in the way in which we tackle this problem. It's often seen as a pretty thankless and impossible task for those working in security awareness and culture change as well. So some recent research, again, let me just quote this, the SANS 2023 Security Awareness Report, which they called Managing Human Risk. It researched nearly 2,000 security awareness practitioners from over 80 countries. And the report really did highlight some of the most common challenges and concerns held by security awareness leaders. And the top four were lack of budget, limits on training time per employee, lack of staffing, and having little time for program management. So again, just to emphasize, the people that are responsible for security awareness training typically are not being given the resource, the time, the support that they need to do an effective job. So it's been a tough task for those people who are, nearly all of them who I've met are absolutely passionate about the work that they're doing. But I would say that I think times they are changing. Our people are increasingly beginning to be seen as the strongest link in the chain. I see less and less blame being attached to staff. A few years ago, I was regularly having discussions with very large enterprise organizations who used phishing tests to identify those that were failing those phishing tests and actually naming them, which is just an appalling way of sort of trying to encourage a positive security culture. And more organizations, I think, are beginning to change their internal narrative. So they're framing security much more positively. They're not calling it mandated training. They know that they must be more targeted in their campaigns. All your staff do not need to have access to all of your training or be sent all of your training. And the reality is many of your staff, the majority of your staff, actually will be behaving very securely most of the time. And finally, there's many now understand that no one size fits all does not work. So again, traditionally, the approach is that you'll send out a standard set of training content, et cetera, to all of your staff. It's now known that it's clearly the evidence suggests that doesn't work. It needs to be far more tailored, relevant, and targeted. So critically, I think we're moving on to what is now increasingly being called cyber human risk management, which is taking us away from just delivering this tick box compliance-driven learning content and from having access to only limited insights. For example, how many people have taken the training, seen the training, or how many people have passed or failed a phishing test, which really doesn't tell us anything about behaviors and feelings. And it's taken us to a place where organizations now can understand employee sentiment, attitudes, and behaviors about security, mapping them to cyber risk scores, which then allow us to quantify and prioritize the human risks we face. it's then giving us real access to actionable intelligence that allows us to go far beyond this simple security awareness training approach in the past to deliver timely, relevant, and critically, for want of a better word, I'm not sure, doable interventions. Anything that we ask our people to do should be understandable, simple to do, and quick as well. And it's about getting employees changing the environment to support specific preferred interventions. So traditional security awareness training is also starting to move outside just the remit of only security. Again, one of the challenges in the past is that it's sat in security, and security doesn't have a very public sort of image across the rest of the organization. And now I see evidence of a lot more security awareness teams involving multiple stakeholders across the organization, which is very refreshing and needed. And I also see organizations to say changing this narrative to human risk scoring and the data insights that help them to relate cyber risk and cyber human risk to the organizational strategy and priorities within their firm, which hits at the heart of one of the other big challenges, is getting continued commitment and investment from executive management and the board, and linking the effectiveness and the value of what you're doing to your firm's strategies and priorities actually will make it, you'll be talking the boardroom language there. And that's far big. Again, I've seen this in a few examples with big organizations, and they're having a lot of success in translating now the work that they've done and getting the data insights and the scoring and applying that to how it's impacting speed to market, how it's protecting them against unwarranted costs, et cetera, and increasing revenue, protecting revenue.
Yeah.
So I see this as a sea change. It is really early days, but we are finally beginning to, I think, realize the importance of marrying what is in effect behavioral science with new data sets and data science, with new tools like automation, machine learning, and AI to make all of this happen.
I think if I look at my own experience with this, I think the attack is far more sophisticated now. They're harder to spot, much more difficult to, particularly things like phishing attacks. I mean, yesterday I got a phone call from somebody claiming to be from the Inland Revenue, saying they sent me a letter that was bounced back and they're going to take legal action, which is, now that may or may not be a phishing attack, and I just don't know. There's nothing in it except for the fact that it came from a mobile phone, and I'm not sure that I may be wrong. Maybe the Inland Revenue do use mobile phones.
And that's why there are sort of public information campaigns out from some of the big banks. Barclays in particular have been very successful at sort of getting this message across to banking customers that a bank will never ask for a passcode, password, or your account number over the phone. It's an ongoing process to get some of these very basic messages about what to look out for, and gut feel means a lot in these instances. So, and again, phishing is one part of this whole equation, but it is a big part. But if you receive an email from someone you think, well, I haven't heard them for a long time, or what they're asking for is a bit out of the ordinary, or there's a demand for saying you have to do this within the next 24 hours, this is urgent. All of these are red flags to sort of thinking, actually, hang on, just let me take a second here. But the attackers know that we are working so quickly, so fast, that we're dealing with so much correspondence and messaging that actually it's all too easy for people to fall foul of this. And it's not a deliberate thing. It's not we can't blame the people for doing this. It is just part of the apparatus that the cyber attackers use. And you talk about more sophistication. You're right, and the attackers are, I've always said the cyber criminals are actually much better at understanding and communicating with, understanding the behaviours of and communicating with our staff than we do, because they understand the sorts of things they can do to sort of get us to do the wrong things all too easily, and they're industrialising that approach. So it is going to be more and more difficult, but I think having a culture where people are more open about talking about this and sharing experiences, I think, is absolutely critical.
Yep, I quite agree. How can you encourage a culture of openness, speedy reporting without assigning blame? And I think that's the thing, because people actually feel embarrassed when they fall and foul of this.
Absolutely. And that we feel, I've felt like this in the past. I've felt embarrassed about or worried that I'm going to show my ignorance and not wanting to ask simple questions of people. So this has got, we've got to move on from there. For me, it's the starting point is making sure that security is not something that is simply, or security training is simply not something that is done to people. All too often you hear you have to do this training. It's mandated. It's forced onto you. Security has to support how your people work and think, and not the other way around. And that we are still in a place where security teams typically send out their security policies. That's it. Read it and sort of make the change to whatever. And it just doesn't work. We've got to present security to a group of people who are working in different contexts that are changing constantly. And we really need security to be fit for purpose. I really don't like the expression, your people are your weakest link. We still hear all too often. It suggests that staff are to blame. And instead, I think our people really should be seen as the strongest link for our organisations. And for me, again, something I've always said is that our people hold many of the keys to unlock the human risks that we face. Like any open culture, the starting point is to build trust with your employees. They need to know that their ideas will be listened to, their questions will be listened to, that feedback will be given, and that they have a real and active role to play in making change. The sad thing is that recent research, Gartner research again, found that 93% of employees performing some sort of unsecure actions in the workplace already knew that their behavior increased risk to the organization. So they know it's not the right thing to do, but the reason they're doing it is it's just going to slow them down. It's going to make their job more difficult. So this shadow IT, as it's called, is still prevalent in many organizations, but talk to and listen to our staff, and they will tell you, they'll be the first people to tell you why they don't always comply with their company security policies. And there was a project I worked on with the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK and one of the big universities where at my old company, Axelos, where we got staff and the information security team in the same room talking about problems, using Lego to define the problem and to then create solutions to that problem. It was illuminating. And it just changed totally within the organisation, the way in which we looked at security and security policies. And so an example of sort of building an environment where your people are actively is where you're asking people to actively report incidents. And there's definitely a wrong way and a right way. The right way is to have a complete transparency and openness, reward, acknowledge those staff who report incidents, make sure there's no payback, like a rap across the knuckles from your boss, for example. Instead, for me, and this is guidance from the National Cybersecurity Centre, a simple mistake that any one of us can make that's reported and resolved quickly is a perfect opportunity to discuss, learn, and build trust between the security team and employees. And then we've got to make sure that feedback is given, updates are provided to the staff who report the incidents, and that we're able to demonstrate the impact of early reporting that can have on any incident. And it works, and it can have a material effect on your ability to stop attacks occurring or minimizing the financial and reputational damage of any attack. It really does. And I'm pleased to say that working with many organisations in the last couple of years, particularly in this area, there is now an understanding that speedy reporting is actively encouraged, part of the objectives of people, and is being managed mainly in the right way, in a positive way, rather than if you don't report it, you're sacked, which I've seen in the past as well.
Which really leads into the next question, doesn't it? Because it's if you're looking to encourage employees to come forward, so how can a business do that better?
Yeah. So again, most organisations rely on security policies to sort of communicate the right and wrong and what you can do and shouldn't do. That policy, or those policies, are sort of enhanced by typically the people responsible for security awareness, who also work to send out wider communication about particular attacks that might be, or particular threats that might be prevalent. But it's vital that whatever security policies you have, that they're non-technical. I've read many security policies, and often they are full of jargon, highly technical, and it's the chance of a normal member of staff understanding it is very low. They're going to need to be readily understood, not overly complicated or overloaded with guidance. They also need to provide actionable things that can be done quickly and effectively by any member of staff. And it's important then to support that with having an ongoing dialogue with your people, because security policies tend to be cast in stone and then not change for years and years. As we know, the risks and the threats change daily in cyber. So it's important that we have this ongoing dialogue with our people to tap into their ways of working, thrash out difficult processes and pressure points with them. And I admit that there are always going to be some rules or regulations within any organisation that are not up for debate. That's absolutely fine. Or a tool that simply can't be upgraded. But most policies can be developed collaboratively, for me, drawing out and understanding the workarounds that people are developing and have developed to help them. You should form part of this new way of working. And a great quote from the NCSC, National Cybersecurity Centre, a few years back: security that doesn't work for people doesn't work. And that's absolutely true. And this is all, for me, this is all part of demystifying security for the majority of people. It's an effective way of helping people design safe practices into their day-to-day work. If they can understand this stuff, and if it's doing something slightly differently that is quick, simple, understandable to do, then there are ways and means that we can encourage them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking when you were sort of saying that, of some of the reported attacks in the past that you come across, where people have left for data breaches, they've left documents in certain places and stuff like that. And the big difficulty here is, of course, that they're not going to report it because they're immediately going to be fired, effectively, for breaching the security policy. Whereas in actual fact, the best thing for the company and for everybody concerned is to get on top of that instantly.
Absolutely. And this comes back to encouraging this environment where people know that they're not going to be sacked or disciplined as a result of admitting that they've done something wrong. We all do it. So we're all fallible. So it is this culture where people not only know that they're not going to be, but also that they're confident that the environment is one where people are not going to laugh at them or they're going to embarrass themselves. It's absolutely not. And this. Well, go on. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I was going to say there was one. I don't remember the actual detail of it now. It was something I was looking at when I was researching this. Where CEO of a company clicks a link and is hundreds of thousands down, after, and that's the CEO of the company. So it's from top to bottom. It's not just the ground level. Yeah,
no, it's absolutely true. Those sorts of attacks, they're called whaling attacks. The ones that actually target chief execs, their peers on the board, their PAs, very, very common. And often successful, because often many of these people think they're immune to this sort of thing, and don't have the processes, checks in place to make sure that these sorts of attacks are headed off at the pass.
Yeah. So you mentioned about demystifying. So can you give me some examples of how to demystify cybersecurity using language?
Sure.
And use cases, stories, anything like that will help?
Oh, storytelling. Yeah, my favorite. So again, any security communication, it comes back to this. It should be framed positively. We're not trying to demonize people in sort of saying, you have to do this. That approach will never work. And words really do have power as well. We need to remember that people never read things as we would expect. However thoroughly they might have read something, their take is often not entirely what we want to expect. So any security messages that we're sending out, we really should be looking to sort of check with people outside security first, just to see how it's likely to be received. This can take time and a willingness to accept that security does not have all the answers, but it can be very effective. Say what you want in a few introductory lines. I'm talking about a sort of simple security message that's being sent out to staff. So a few introductory lines, tell them very concisely what you want to tell them, only one or two things to avoid overload. Again, I've seen long, detailed messages from the security teams that no one's ever going to have any incentive to read. And then sign off in this positive way, emphasizing that staff are helping to make a difference. So again, this sort of approach helps to build this atmosphere of honesty and transparency. But it also sort of highlights another important element, that non-security colleagues, people outside security, have a job to do with all the pressures that involves before they even begin to think about security. So their own productivity will be important to them, and why cause them any additional problems. It's important to avoid ending security messages as well with this sort of threat, whether it's real or implied. Use cases. So an example, one client I had a few years ago was a Premiership football team, and they asked me and the team to create real life stories based on real and actual incidents and near misses that different staff members within the club had experienced. So we did that, talked to the staff, had a whole range of different incidents from across different people in different roles in the company. And these were translated into a range of interactive materials that we then used in their team meetings to discuss how different behaviours could lead to different outcomes, some of them positive, some of them not. The result, I'm pleased to say, was a much more open and confident workforce who knew that they could discuss any concerns at any time with their colleagues and managers. You mentioned storytelling as well, James. I am passionate about the power of good storytelling. It is so important, and cyber gives rise to the opportunity to tell some really good stories, because we've got the good guys and the bad guys. Told well, stories really can change perceptions and attitudes and drive positive action. And we want our stories to make people feel differently about their responsibility to do things safely. One personal example, when I was at Axelos, I wanted to think of a new and original way to try and get the message across to board directors, senior executives. Comes back to the whaling attack you just mentioned. So I thought, how about writing a thriller? A thriller based on obviously fictional, and I don't know if you can see that, but we called it Whaling for Beginners. It tells the story. It's written as a thriller. There's no technology in there, and it was written by a thriller writer who I got to know and briefed. It tells the story of a guy called Jim Baines, who's the chief exec of a US packaging company. Just that's what it was. But it tells us the emotional journey that he goes on once he realizes that he was the target and victim of an attack. Now, the feedback to that story, this little book here, was phenomenal, far greater than I could ever have imagined. I just thought it would be a nice little marketing tool. I had meetings where senior directors were saying to me, have you seen this book, Whaling for Beginners? Because somehow it sort of virally, physically got into the market. So there were 2 or 3 meetings when I was having meetings with the senior directors, briefing board directors, and they're saying, have you seen Whaling for Beginners? I said, well, that's our little baby. So, and they said the impact that had, actually, it made me feel differently about it and just to take more care about it. So it's things like that. Obviously, that took some time to produce and create, but it is telling stories rather than just throwing statistics out to people, which really washes over most people. It is telling that story and getting people to relate to that story. It's like reading a very good book. It brings you in and you start thinking differently as a result.
Yep. So we mentioned at the start of this how important leadership is in this. So what role should leadership teams play in championing the information security across their work?
Very, very critical for many, and all too often, very sadly, I've seen one of the biggest problems facing many organisations that I've advised and tried to help is the challenge they have of going to the next step, where they're convincing the board that what they're doing is the right thing to do, and they're looking for more investment, ongoing commitment, and that can be a big challenge, because this is way down for many board directors, way down their priority list. For me, like any leadership responsibility, it starts with them walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Leadership teams remain some of the most vulnerable people within any organisation, so it's vital that they are seen to be setting the right example, positively encouraging safe behaviours, and regularly talking to staff about their feelings and attitudes about security, the importance of information security, because ultimately it can significantly impact what they are doing as a board. I've seen the power of this happen in front of my eyes, actually. It's quite it was a fantastic afternoon I had. It was a few years ago. I was presenting to all of the staff, including the board, of a mid-sized advisory firm, and I was telling them about this whole area around the importance of the human factor and human risk management, and the importance of leadership. And when I was talking about the importance of strong leadership, the new CEO of this organisation, he'd been in post for about 3 or 4 months. So he stood up, he politely interrupted me, stood up to support what I was saying, and then told all of his people publicly about a mistake that he had made a few weeks earlier that caused a significant security scare. And you could sense this around the room. The impact was tangible. And all of a sudden, the staff realised that they were all in this together. And I'm, again, pleased to say the firm's approach to building a positive security culture changed from that time onward. It was a very powerful thing, because most people will follow their leader, will follow the chief exec. So and it's also important to note that leadership teams, they're never going to be security experts. They never need to be security experts, but they do need to be seen to be talking about it and communicating the importance of good security behaviours. But it's also the job of the security team to translate the human risk management work that they're doing into insights that link back to what the board cares about, which is their strategic objectives and the priorities, the strategic priorities of the organisation. And without doing that, the board are unlikely to be converted. But link some of the things that you're doing to the importance of getting a new product to market, or making this new acquisition in the marketplace, or protecting unwanted costs, being more efficient in the way in which you're delivering this stuff. All of these messages can help the board understand what you're trying to do. The other thing is, in talking about human risk, it's moving away from technology. And I think many board directors actually feel a little bit as if many know that they need to know more about technology, or feel that they need to know more about technology. But most of them will be interested in human behavior, because this isn't something that is just linked to security. It's linked to health and safety. It's linked to diversity. It's linked to so many agendas that are driving the board's now. So you start talking about human behavior, human risks. I think the boards are going to sort of start sitting up and taking more note.
Okay. So just looking at the sort of recruitment process and how that can contribute to the security of an organization. And comment generally on that, and then we can maybe explore it a little bit further as well.
Sure. So based on everything that I've said, it's a very interesting area, this, because I think the role and therefore the skills required for people within security, but particularly within this area of human risk management, cyber human risk management, I think it provides a great opportunity to elevate, to broaden out from the old security awareness training role to one that's far more influential within security and across the wider business. So I think based on what I've outlined about the marrying of behavioral science and data analytics with new technologies like machine learning and AI, it's the skill set for this new person, this superhuman person who is going to be the head of human cyber risk management. New skill sets like human-centered design, user experience skills, change management skills, so many issues that I've seen in organizations around security awareness and culture change linked to change management. Experience of dealing with multiple stakeholders, analytical skills, excellent interpersonal skills, marketing communications expertise, some expertise or some experience in business strategy, behavioral economics, and reporting, understanding how best to report to your executives and your senior managers. I think all of those skills are going to be part of the new sort of job description for this person and that team. And I hope it's a team rather than one person. And as I said earlier, I think the cyber human risk management market is going to grow rapidly. Gartner, the market analyst, they recently predicted that by 2025, which when I first read this, thought that's a long time away. That's just a year after next, isn't it? So they reckon by year after next, 40% of cybersecurity programs will deploy socio-behavioral principles to influence security culture, and up from less than 5% in 2021. And that by 2026, at least 50% of C-level executives will have performance requirements related to security risk built into their employment contracts. So for me, what a great opportunity for the market to join forces, suppliers, service providers, clients, to drive this new approach around cyber human risk management and tackling what is the largest security vulnerability that organizations face.
And what about recruitment generally? So you're talking there about somebody who's responsible for the human element. How would you use recruitment, if you like, to not filter, that's the wrong word, but through the recruitment process to actually understand what you need to do with people that are coming into the organization? So, for example, if I were to put, would you put it into into the interview process to talk about their experience and involvement with security and their understanding of security, not from the point of view of excluding, but from training?
So you're talking about anybody else that might be working, so not necessarily security people, James?
Not necessarily security people, generally,
That's an interesting question. I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that one. Typically, most organizations will have some sort of induction program when people come in. Obviously, that's after the interview process, which then that's where they start pushing out what can be pretty standardized security awareness or information security training. Bringing it up at the interview. So, it depends on the company, I suppose. It depends on to what degree the organization themselves feel passionately about this and the importance of information security. And if they if information security is a key part of that organization, and many organizations are now seeing their ability to be leading around information security and to have this sort of positive, people-centered culture as a differentiator for them against competitors in the market. If an organization is thinking like that, yeah, absolutely, then that's a good technique, is to ask any potential employee, what's your sort of thought about the importance of information security for a company like ours? I think it's quite a good idea. But I think it would only work for those organizations where it is actually a sort of a strategic priority. And I think we're still some way from that, because again, it's got to be driven by the boards in that respect.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we've been going for 40 minutes now, so I think we've probably covered most of what you intended to. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's great, James. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing I would say is, if any of you listening want to talk more, I was just saying, if any of you want to talk more or hear more, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have the opportunity of talking with any of you in a little bit more detail.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say in summary before we leave?
No, other than I'm currently working as an independent consultant in this market, working with a couple of the leading providers. Again, if any of you out there want to hear more about some of the work that these guys are doing, I'd love to tell you more. So get in touch.
Okie doke.
And thanks again to you, James.
Yeah, and your contact details for that will be in LinkedIn, yeah?
To talk this morning.
Yeah, your contact details will be in LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Yeah. Just search on Nick Wilding. I should be there on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to end the stream now.